Welcome to a new edition of G-Rated, where we review the latest TV shows and movies. We're in the Four Peaks minibar today. I'm your host, Gerald Bourget, joined by Derek and virtually by Johnny, my Star Wars crew reassembled for the latest Star Wars show. We're talking about Ahsoka Season 1 today. The finale just dropped Tuesday night. And guys, I know that people have been kind of torn on this one. I know like the diehard Star Wars fans love it, the people that watch the animated shows. Yep. And I know maybe the more casual, wider, live action only audience is kind of like, what the hell's going on? So I wanted to get your guys' thoughts. Derek, we'll start with you. Just your general thoughts on Ahsoka and the 8 episodes that just wrapped.
I loved it. I love it. I will say this. I have watched Clone Wars. I have watched Rebels. I have not watched all of the seasons of either of those shows. I think Clone Wars goes on for what, like seven seasons, yeah. Right? It's incredible. What I do love about this show is how unapologetically they are about progressing this show right where Rebels left off. They do not give a shit whether or not you watched Rebels. And even though they're going to do recaps before every episode of what happened in the last episode, they're never going to recap you on what happened in Rebels. You're just going to have to either go watch that show or just enjoy this for what it is. And I think that part of it is also very Star Wars, right? From the minute I first watched Star Wars as a little kid and started comprehending movies and what they were about, I always kind of wondered why Star Wars started in the middle of the story, right? And we know that George Lucas had a reason for that, but I think that's what always made Star Wars so cool, is from the first time you watched it, you already were thrown right into the middle of the story. You were never really there from the beginning. And so in that way, I feel like they try to fill in some of the backstory for Ahsoka, but I don't feel like they necessarily need to. I kind of like the fact that they're just going on with this narrative, with this story. These people have these relationships. You'll kind of understand what relationships they have throughout the show as they kind of explain it to you a little bit, but they're really not going to go backwards for all of those diehards that did watch every moment of every one of those animated series and like start the story over or retell those stories. They're simply progressing it like this is another season of those shows. And I love them for doing that.
Johnny, how about you?
You know, I texted Gerald 2 weeks ago and I said, man, I did not expect this season of Ahsoka to be on par with Mando season 1 and 2, yet here we are. Yeah. I will take back part of that because I did not love the final 2 episodes. I thought the series as a whole, or the season as a whole, assuming we get a season 2, was really good. Dave Filoni, the creator, fantastic. I don't have any problems with how they wrote the show. I think some of the execution in the final 2 episodes, especially the finale, and we're going to talk about that, left some stuff to be desired, clearly setting up season 2, the potential Thrawn movie, right? And I get that. But I think for a casual fan, you may not know that's coming. You may be like, well, where's Balin? Where's Shin? What's going on? I would put it still right below Mando season 1 and 2. That's still really good entry, solid all around. You know, to me, they called Ahsoka, but I'm with you guys. They probably should have just called it like Rebels season 5 or whatever.
Yes.
You'd have a tough time. Does Sabine have more dialogue in this show than Ahsoka? Because it certainly felt that way. I have no problem with that. The actress did a fantastic job. But to me, like, you watch what he's done, Dave Filoni, who created Rebels, this felt like an extension of an animated show. And there's nothing wrong with that. But I think it needs to continue to evolve to get to a point where I'm taking it seriously from a theatrical standpoint. Like where we talked about Mando season 3, Mando felt a little bit, I don't know, animated at times, and some of the storylines didn't make sense. And so we need to get back to that kind of elite level storytelling, but they're close. And I understand what they're going for. You know, for me, like the middle episodes of the season were next level great. I thought it started solid. Yeah. And then like, what was it? 4, 5, and 6 were fantastic. Like it's some of the best live action Star Wars we've gotten, in my opinion, since the original trilogy. So for that alone, it's a B+, A- show for me. I would have loved to have seen it stick the landing, but here's what I will say. I do think they have been hampered because when these shows were created, Mando season 3 and Ahsoka, it was like height of the pandemic, coming out of the pandemic, the Obi-Wan show, like they're not as crisp and clean as some of those original shows. And so, you know, you can tell this, some of it's shot on location, some of it looked a little TV to me, but all in all, really enjoyed it. Watched it every Tuesday. Loved this, the 6 p.m. drop for here, for us on the West Coast now. Thank goodness for that. And I'm excited for what they do in season 2.
And I do think Johnny made a great point there in comparing Ahsoka to season 3 of The Mandalorian a bit, just because of the fact that like it does feel at times like the seasons of this show, even though they are called Ahsoka or Mandalorian, it's kind of a vehicle to start something else. And that's what a big part of this felt like. But I feel like they did a really good job with that, much better than that season of Mandalorian.
I agree. And I think, like you guys have touched on, it was really rewarding for the people that have been waiting to see these characters make their live action debuts. Like, I know one of my biggest complaints, well, minor complaints, is that we didn't see Zeb, but we got to see Hera for the first time. We got to see Rosario Dawson flesh out the Ahsoka character. We got to see Ezra, Thrawn. Like, those are huge moments for the people that have been watching these shows for years. And I love that it was just unapologetically like, if you get it, this is huge for you. Like this is for you specifically. And Dave Filoni gets it in that way. There were so many callbacks to those shows, so many things that people were, the Leonardo DiCaprio meme, like pointing at the TV. And you can't discredit that. I know that you can knock the show a little bit for not being more widely accessible, but when you watch those middle 2 episodes, and those for me, like Johnny, were the peak of the season. Like seeing Hayden Christensen again get the opportunity to kind of take back the prequels and make them, and be more of the Clone Wars Anakin that we saw and flesh out that relationship. Like that was incredible. The visuals, flashing between him and Vader, the whole storyline even of Ahsoka being able to, she had the Sith eyes for a second there. And that was one of her big fears is, am I going to follow my master's footsteps, reconciling with his legacy, as complicated as it was and as evil as he became, and choosing life, choosing to not dwell on the past and choosing to move forward. Like the way that those 2 episodes were done were up there for me with like the Mando season 2 finale, or the first time we saw Ahsoka in Mando, of like, this is incredible Star Wars content.
It also reminded me of Obi-Wan in the fact that like it just felt like they were doing something to make their existing movies better, right? Continuing a story. Maybe there's stuff that we felt like never got finalized, that thing we never saw. And like these shows are able to go back and kind of retroactively add to the entire story. One thing about this show that it does do, as far as, if you're we make content around here. If you're a content maker like Disney is, right, is it does make people want to go watch Rebels and Clone Wars, because they do feel like if they missed out that there's a lot of stuff there for them to go get in on. And those are tremendous shows. So it's recommended that you do that, even though they're animated. I know a lot of adults have a hard time buying into it because it's an animated show, but it really was a well-done show that is for both adults and children. And I just think that this show does a great job of making you want to go enjoy more of the content that's out there.
I do find it fascinating, just if we're going to dive into, the plot of the show and how it sets up, further Star Wars content, because supposedly this is supposed to interweave with Mando, with the upcoming Skeleton Crew series. And they're all going to play off of each other en route to this big movie that's coming. Who knows when that movie is going to come out? But I do think it's interesting. Like, they have to at some point address, and we'll get into spoilers here, but like, where are all these characters in the sequel trilogy? And like, by opening up now this other universe, like, is that a crutch for them now to lean on that, further down the line? Like, they're all just going to go live in this external galaxy. Because theoretically, you're not going to kill all these characters off. And I know Dave Filoni didn't write the sequel trilogy. A lot of this was in development in terms of his animated shows simultaneously. But you're butting up against legacy characters and legacy canon. And you're also adapting, which I appreciate, the Thrawn novels of the early 90s. So it's going to be a tight rope that they're going to have to walk. Now, I trust Dave Filoni's, the heir apparent to George Lucas, in my opinion. And if anything, he's going to be able to rationalize and explain everything. But I'm very curious how they're going to do that, because one of the things that I'm glad they addressed on the show was, the cameo by C-3PO. I liked it, and I know a lot of people had an issue with it. They felt like it was forced. I thought it was appropriate. But referencing, it was great. Referencing Princess Leia, like, you have to reference Luke Skywalker and Princess Leia. Right. Like, Luke Skywalker has to be a part of this show and this story at some point. Like,
yes,
this was the one season You want to play outside your sandbox, go into a different universe, do all that. But Thrawn is back now. Like, you have to, legacy characters have to be included in this. Otherwise, it loses weight for me. Like, no. These are the people that defeated the Empire and blew up 2 Death Stars. Like, you have to be able to include that. So I'm very interested, like, because I know a lot of people are pushing back, Gerald and Derek, against AI and everything that's going on with Carrie Fisher's death. Like, are they going to recast these characters? That for me, and I know I'm getting away from the story of the season 1. That for me is like the most interesting aspects of it. Everything under the surface on top of the story.
You're right, though. I mean, I think honestly, I don't know if I'm just such an absolute mark for this entire universe, but C-3PO showing up popped me. I mean,
it was great.
I got a little teary-eyed seeing him come in here, right? But and you're always going to do that to me with C-3PO, with R2-D2, with Chewbacca. Like, these are characters that can always pop up, and the minute you bring that nostalgia back to me, it's gonna affect me. But like, I do want them to be more than cameos, like you said. I want them to be woven into the story, and I want to see how this impacted them afterwards, because we know so many of them survived, right, to make it to the sequels. So we know that they're still around at that point. There needs to be that kind of, gap bridged, obviously, and this can do that. And I think, honestly, going back to your thing, I hate for this to be the outcome, but I mean, Rogue One taught me that just killing everybody at times is the appropriate answer. And I don't know.
And I'm fine with that. I almost wish they would have killed somebody in the finale. Like, to have Thrawn feel, because one of my small criticisms is Thrawn, to me, it's built up as this big threat. Nobody died in the finale, right? And they were kind of teasing that some people would die. And I'm doubting Dave Filoni would kill off some of his Rebels crew, but like, really felt like somebody might have needed to eat it to be able to feel the weight of, hey, Thrawn is back, and he took out X, Y, and Z, and now he's back in the galaxy.
So Morgan Elsbeth didn't do it for you.
No. I'm talking about, let's get one of our heroes, because I don't know if you guys caught this, but at the end of the second to last episode, Ezra kept saying, "Oh man, I can't wait to get home. I'm going home again." And I'm like, is he going to eat it in the finale? Are they going to kill him off? And like, while I like wouldn't have been my favorite thing, I would have understood it from a narrative perspective. And Thrawn has to get some dubs at some point. Like, I feel like they've tailored it. He's intimidating. But like, all he did was he got off the planet. Like, we need to see him enact some destruction and chaos and that kind of thing. I would have loved to have seen somebody on the Rebels crew die in the name of the show.
I have to ask one question. Does Thrawn, looking so much like Elon Musk, make him more evil or less evil?
I think more evil, but that's a great conversation. I will say, Thrawn, having him played by Lars Mikkelsen, who voiced him in the show, was so great.
Yeah,
I know that some people were making fun of kind of the Despicable Me looking attire that he had on, as far as shape. But
I love it. He so fits in with all of the like Empire, weird outfits that we see them make the officers wear and everything. Just his, like, he nails this character. But like Johnny said, the fact that they found this character from the 80s novels that they were able to bring into Rebels, and now they fleshed out in, on the big screen or the little screen, whatever you want to call this. He's such a good villain.
It's meaningful.
And it is meaningful. But yeah, I think Johnny's right. I mean, I guess what they wanted to do is show that he was willing to kill his own zombie soldiers in order for them, like whatever. But like you said, I mean, he was willing to sacrifice his own people. Yeah. Right. So is every Empire villain. Like, you need to show me like some more evil like than that.
What comes next is crucial, because like Johnny mentioned, you are kind of butting up against the sequel trilogy. And I understand their desire to flesh out this chapter with beloved characters and to kind of retroactively improve the sequels as far as what's coming next. I mean, I'm sure that we're leading to a point where Thrawn in some way influences the Emperor's Return, all the cloning shit that they've been working on off to the side and all this stuff. But it's interesting how they're going to do that, because like with Ahsoka, we hear her voice at the end of Rise of Skywalker when all the Jedi voices are reaching out to Rey. Ahsoka is one of those voices. And we also see Ghost, which is the Rebel ship, show up with all those ships that come to their aid in the very end there. So we know that some of them live, but does the the Force voice of Ahsoka reaching out mean that she's dead at that point? Is she in the middle of that battle, like talking to Rey, like what's going on? Is Ezra dead by then? Because then we just have a Jedi that just didn't show up anywhere in that movie. So these are all interesting questions that we'll answer later. But I will say, like, I thought this show was casted really well. I feel like Hera didn't have nearly enough to do in that storyline.
No.
Kind of sucked. Like they got her in the ship with Chopper one time in like the second episode. And that was kind of it.
And I needed more Chopper too.
Needed more Chopper. Needed more for Hera to do. Needed any Zeb. But like the way that they casted Ezra was great. Like Sabine, Natasha Liu Bordizzo, who played her, I thought she did a really good job. And to your point, Johnny, it was at times it was hard to tell whose show exactly this was.
Yeah. For sure.
And I think they addressed the biggest problem in the finale was that a lot of their mentorship apprentice thing was handled off screen. And so until the very end, we didn't know why Sabine supposedly wanted to be a Jedi or why Ahsoka didn't want to train her. And we learned, I think, in episode 4 about, what happened to Sabine's family. But I thought that they finally addressed that in a way that made sense for their characters. Like she was afraid that Sabine, the warrior that she was going to take that, these new Jedi powers and go down the wrong path. Yeah. And especially with knowing what happened to her master, that all tracked. I thought they could have dived into that a little bit better, but I overall, I thought this was a really good show. It had really good characters. Like we barely even talked about Balin and Shin Hati, who are very compelling anti-heroes that I hope we get to see more of. Obviously, Ray Stevenson's death kind of changes
it's so tragic because he was such an excellent character, such a great actor, and I feel like I barely got to even know him. And the first thing that we know is that he passed away, in the first episode of the season. But yeah, it's a very good character. And I mean, as far as the cliffhanger and everything is concerned, I really loved the way that I know Johnny wasn't a big fan of the final episode. I loved the kind of Empire Strikes Back feeling of, like they didn't win. They didn't make it on the ship. There is this sense of like, well, they're kind of screwed. What are they going to do now? And I mean, it does make me just instantly want this next season. And I've always said this about television, but television should always make you crave to see that next episode. And sometimes shows do it to excess where they do it in every single episode. They try to leave everything in a cliffhanger. But this was a good one for me because I can't wait to see what happens next.
I will say I have a minor gripe. We're getting to a point where I feel like we might have too many Jedi running around, and that's why I thought somebody might have died in the finale. So, like, hypothetically, let's just assume that Ahsoka and Sabine make it back, and maybe Shin. I think Shin, not to dive onto the deep end, but depending on if you read the Thrawn novels, there's a character called Mara Jade that ends up marrying Luke Skywalker. And the theory is that I don't think she'll marry Luke Skywalker, but she is like the Mara Jade of Filoni's story right now. Mara Jade was like Darth Vader's like secret apprentice and worked for the Empire. So that aside, so you've got Ahsoka, Sabine, Luke Skywalker potentially, Jason, Hera's son, and then also Ezra. You have too many Jedi, in my opinion, to do. Like, if you're gonna do this Thrawn movie, I don't want to see like 10 people with lightsabers like that. And I liked the finale, and they were all swinging their lightsabers. But like, I'm surprised we haven't talked about this. Like, to me, I did not think Sabine's Force usage felt earned. Like, she went from she couldn't move anything, and now she's pushing Ezra over that big hole.
Yeah,
that was a leap.
A
literal leap.
And it just, come on, Dave. That he just couldn't help himself there, and I get that. And you can build up to that point, but like, not everybody has to be a Jedi.
It just happens so fast. Yeah.
Right. And what made Luke Skywalker the best character, in my opinion, in the original trilogies is he was a singular entity. And so I do think it will be one of the criticisms I have of the prequel is just that scene in Attack of the Clones when they're all running around with lightsabers. And it was just like overstimulation. Like, okay, you're losing some weight to the story here, but it's clear like Ezra's going to train Jason, right? Just like Kanan trained him. You're going to get Luke Skywalker back at some point. Like, Ahsoka's not dying. Sabine just used her Force powers. Like, what does Thrawn have? Like, Thrawn has his dead army, and he'll have some supporters with inside the New Republic, and they'll come out. But like, he doesn't have a Vader-esque entity next to him or a Palpatine. So I'm like, all these Force users and the New Republic versus Thrawn. Like, I don't know, man. It seems a little uneven.
Can I throw one crazy conspiracy theory out there? Ezra has just been weird to me this whole time. So what if Ezra becomes that?
If he becomes something
like a Sith, what if he goes under Thrawn? What if he's like there? Because
you would need to have done that like this season, though. I feel like.
Yeah, I mean, well, and the one thing about the Ezra's interactions is that they've just all been kind of weird, right? Like, if you want to talk about gripes, Sabine's been looking for him all this time, and then she finally finds him, and it's like, hey.
Okay, I had a problem with both that reunion and the one with Hera.
With Hera, no hugs,
and they cut out so awkwardly. They could have cut out while they were looking at each other in like a meaningful, emotional way, but instead they cut out like right when he starts walking towards her. Like, what are we? That was weird to me. But I wonder if Snoke is going to come into play at some point. That would probably make sense to me. But you're right, Johnny. Like, Thrawn has to get some wins because he's one of the most formidable, respected, well-liked villain characters in all of Star Wars. And right now it just feels like he's been taking L's from a Jedi who looks like Moses. Like,
yeah, right, for real.
And
I honestly don't know this, but are they going to go in the direction where Snoke is like a messed up Emperor clone, potentially? Because if so, that tracks with him coming back and aiding the cloning process. And
let's be real. Like they have to make the sequel trilogy make sense narratively, and so that's what they're doing right now. Is like you can't ignore it, right? Yeah. Even though I'm sure Dave Filoni would like to tell his own story, so you have to kind of force into it. And I thought that a little bit of the issue with Mandalorian season 3 is you were trying to shoehorn some of that garbage in there. Yeah. But here's what I will say: I didn't know this till I read the Thrawn novels, but they did do cloning in the Thrawn novels. Like, they attempt to clone Luke Skywalker in those novels. So if you want to, so I think like Grogu's arc was kind of like that, where they tried to clone Grogu. Yeah. So they're interweaving it, but again, like, you got to make it make sense for people who are invested in this, like we are. Like, casual people might be like, "Oh yeah, that's cool. I don't know what the time gap is and who's going to take over or whatever." But
what's the world between worlds?
Right. You can't argue that you watch the sequel trilogy and then you're trying to consume this, and it just doesn't feel the same yet. Like, it doesn't feel like they're playing in the same sandbox. All of these characters we're being told are so important, and none of them are around. So you better make it make sense.
Yeah.
Right. That's a good, let's move on to our complaints and concerns. But one more good thing before we do that, I will say that the lightsaber choreography in this was very well done. Like, I've been waiting for them to get back, because in the sequel trilogy, they're very much untrained wielding these lightsabers like they're big ass, two-handed swords. And I did appreciate that about the prequel trilogy and like Clone Wars. Like, the lightsaber choreography in this was really good.
That final battle in the final scene,
it was great.
It was very samurai-like.
Yes.
And I know that's obviously been a huge inspiration on the Star Wars series. So it's another case of Dave Filoni getting it when he understands what the original vision is, and interweaving those kind of old stories that this whole space opera is based on, on some of that stuff.
Right. So as far as complaints and concerns go, I do think, as much as I enjoyed this entire show and I liked the finale, I didn't love the finale because it feels like it's struggling from something that Johnny alluded to. It's kind of like this Marvel disease of like, we're building up to the next big crossover event. So we're laying the groundwork. So this story is not going to have a complete ending. And I thought it did a good job of completing some character arcs for like Ahsoka and Sabine and stuff like that. But it just, and I did love the ending with Hayden Christensen looking on. It was very much a parallel of when Ahsoka walked away from the Jedi Order, very similar shot even. But like, it does feel like it's kind of like that slow build process. And that's tough for people that are just looking to watch the show and haven't watched the 200 plus episodes of Clone Wars and Rebels.
Yeah.
Obviously we could talk about Baylan and Shin basically being sidelined for the entire finale. And I know that they didn't know that Ray Stevenson would pass, and they were probably planning big things for him because he is a great character. But my question now is, do you recast that role and let that character live on? How do you handle that storyline? Because you can't just introduce the Mortis gods and have this compelling villain just kind of disappear into the ether there. Again, no Zeb, not enough for Hera, not enough Chopper.
I think Zeb's still going to be a big, like, big thing when he shows up.
I hope so.
And I think almost because of how many characters they put out throughout this season, and they every time they were going to show one of them, we were going to lose it.
Right.
Oh, here's Chopper. Here's Ezra eventually.
Right.
And it did feel like that. But yeah, I do think that you can't do this without Zeb showing up at some point. But I do agree with you in regards and what Johnny said in regards to laying the groundwork and. Again, Johnny, like you said, trying to make your story go from where you want it here to there, wherever they started it up here. And also remembering all of those little details about Ghost showing, oh, well, we can't blow the ship up. We can't do this. There's all these things we have to remember because we got to keep it canon. But I will say that I do like the interweaving that and the connecting of stories. I am a big fan of them doing that. I am a sucker for that when it comes to the Marvel stuff and this stuff doing it. The problem is that it has to be done in the right way. Because if it's not, even me who's connect it all up. If I don't like the end result, I'm just going to be yeah, you screwed it up. You ruined it,
Yeah. I will say, I don't know. I really did like the show. I don't want it to come off as negative because there were some complaints and some criticisms that I had with it, but I did overall really enjoy seeing the show. And like I said, it is definitely made for Star Wars fans. So if we're moving on to final scores, I'm going to give this an 8.5 out of 10. I think Andor's still a better show. And I think season 2 of Mando might be, it's on par with season 2 of Mando for me in terms of just meaningful Star Wars moments that me as a fan really enjoyed. And I think it's getting closer to a place where we're telling Star Wars specific stories that are actually good. This one just happened to be less accessible than some of the others.
Yeah. And I would agree with you. I was going to give it an 8, and I feel like I might even have liked it more than I didn't have a problem with the finale or some of the stuff they did. But I will say that some of the complaints are well warranted, and some of the stuff at times can kind of be like that, where it doesn't make sense that a woman who couldn't move a cup just a few episodes is now force pushing a guy.
So I felt like her picking up the lightsaber was earned, but then her throwing him thousands of feet to the air, maybe a little stretch.
The lightsaber was a little bit right.
We knew that.
It took a lot of work.
We knew that was coming. We've seen Star Wars do it so many times, but that was a little over the top. We are going to insert Johnny's score here right now.
Enjoyed the series for what it was. Absolutely. I'm excited to see a season 2. Hopefully they get to shelve out more depth with these characters. I give it a solid 8 out of 10. Not necessarily upper tier Star Wars, of course, like the original trilogy, Mando season 1 and 2. But I would say in that next tier, it's a solid double, if not a triple for Disney Plus. And for a lot of, let's just call it what it is, garbage content they've been putting on that app lately, it got me to my television set every single Tuesday at 6 p.m. So if they continue to build on these characters that they've now established to the casual audience, I'm excited with many others to see what they do come season 2.
That's going to do it for this edition of G-Rated. You can follow me on Twitter at Gerald Bourget. You can follow Derek on Twitter at Cap_Caveman. And you can follow Johnny at Johnny Venerable. Until next time, keep it G-Rated.
We all silly like the mayor.